Hello, and welcome to today's 45th webinar in the On the Move webinar series, From Simple to Complex, How WES Scales to Your Needs, brought to you by Honeywell Intelligrated. I'm Tracy Niehaus, Director of Marketing for Honeywell Intelligrated, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. You may ask an online question at any time throughout today's presentation in the Q&A feature on your screen. Simply type your question into the text area and hit submit. Questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation, with the exception of technical questions that can be asked and will be answered real time. Please note that we recommend that you be hardwired when attending this webinar. A Wi-Fi connection may result in a lag time in slides updating, graphics loading, and videos playing. Today's webinar includes polling questions. Please feel free to answer these questions when they appear, and be sure to click submit so we can include your response, as we will be sharing the results real time during the live event. If you'd like to revisit key sections of today's webinar, it will be available on demand at sps.honeywell.com by clicking on the resources link under the automation support section a few days after the live event. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recorded event. Now on to the presentation, From Simple to Complex, How WES Scales to Your Needs. Discussing today's topic will be Suzanne Mchugh. Suzanne is a Senior Manager of Offering Management at Honeywell Intelligrated and has been in the distribution and fulfillment industry for 7 years. She has hands-on experience in labor, retail, e-commerce, and omni-channel fulfillment, and previously worked for a major apparel retailer. She has performed various roles focusing on industrial engineering, continuous improvement, and leading complex systems integrations in order to deliver value to customers. And with that introduction, the webinar will now begin.
All right, thanks Tracy, and thanks everyone for joining. We're actually going to get started with a poll question to gauge our audience today. So what has been the impacts of COVID-19 on your order management, fulfillment, and distribution processes? You can choose any and all that apply to you. So we have labor challenges, increased customer expectations around same day, next day, and free delivery, increase in the volume of your e-commerce orders, fulfilling more orders faster and at lower cost, or reducing errors in your order processes. Just take a minute to answer for me, and we'll see what the results are. I think a lot of us are having a lot of these challenges today. All right, okay, so a lot of labor challenges, which is expected, and then the others are a little even. So that's great, because we actually, on some of the reports that we're seeing, we can see that labor has been a huge challenge. Over 40% of retailers like yourself on this call are facing labor challenges, and over 30% are dealing with increased SLAs, the increase in the volume of your e-com orders, and the need to move faster while reducing costs. And many of you have probably joined this webinar looking for ways to combat some of these challenges. Sorry, I had to change my slide. Sorry for that delay. So we always say that if you have a warehouse management system, then you're a candidate for a warehouse execution system. So it's no longer, about pre-planned work that's rigid and kind of dumped out to the floor. So to thrive in today's market, DCs need to have software that can help contract these demanding SLAs, and it's no longer just enough to have the product in stock and ready to fulfill. DCs must ship the right product at the right time, and its ultimate goal is to make your customers happy. And so how we look at the WES is we really look at it as the brains of your operation. So here at Honeywell, we kind of see these 4 main pillars of what the WES provides, but it's really able to orchestrate your operation end-to-end, as it has visibility into the labor in your building, as well as any automation that you might be leveraging. So the WES is able to leverage all that real-time data of the activity happening in the DC to make real-time decisions of what to do in order to increase your throughput, maximize the equipment and the labor, and meet those SLAs that you're facing. So the other thing that WES helps with is kind of breaking down the silos in your building. So regardless if you're using lots of different equipment or have different vendors, that WES provides this layer that can fully orchestrate all the components of your building. So the WES is pulling inputs from every area or process to keep it humming, and not only does it coordinate some traditional equipment or automation that you see here, like sorters or conveyor, it also has an understanding of the business processes traditionally consumed by the warehouse management system. So things like, your picking process, put away, receiving. The WES also has that understanding and knowledge of those flows within your building to make the best decisions. And then since each process impacts each other's downstream, it's no longer efficient to kind of look at those as separate parts of your DC. So how you receive and put away and slot things in inbound will affect how you're able to fulfill your outbound orders. So now I'll get into, throughout the rest of the presentation, I'm going to get into some specifics of what a WES can do for you. And we can see that order picking is roughly over 30% of the bottleneck or delays in your fulfillment process. And over the next 12 months, we can see the operations are looking to help improve these processes by reducing errors, improving accuracy, and increasing the productivity within these different processes. By incorporating smarter software and automation, your order fulfillment cycle times can be streamlined and reduced, which actually leads us to our next polling question. So I'm interested to see from the audience what technologies that you're looking to adopt to advance your order fulfillment processes. So again, you can choose one or many, all that apply to you. So we have Pixelite, which is, I have the acronyms here for you, PTL, Automated Storage and Retrieval Systems, a goods-to-person solution, or AMRs. So please take a moment to fill out the poll, and then we'll look at the results in just a second. Okay. Awesome. We got lots of good results. So almost 80% of you are interested in AMRs and goods-to-person solutions, ASRS pretty high up there, and Pixelate. So we're actually going to get into all of these examples and more about how a WES kind of integrates and helps with these solutions. So the first thing I want to go to before we get into actual, having someone pick and fulfill the order is more of the upstream planning and prioritization process. So we are going to look at this image I have here on the left, and it's actually showing the two orders, which represents this blue and yellow line you see in the graph, and it's representing those two different orders and how they got processed over units of time. And so what you see is there's different results. So in the first one, the blue order finishes first, and then the second one, it finishes second. So depending on how you release and sequence work in your DC, you're going to get different results. So if we assume that the SLA or the delivery time for the yellow order was actually earlier than the blue order, the second one would be more favorable to you. And so the reason this is important is the warehouse management system doesn't really have that capability to make those decisions at the last moment of what to release to the floor at any given time. So traditional waves that are typically done by the warehouse management system today doesn't allow you to make those decisions and adjust what should be released based on what's going downstream in your building. Now we're going to get into some examples of technologies that once this work is released, how can you fulfill those orders. So in this next video, you'll see how Pixelite can be leveraged. So in this video, you can see that this is actually a picker, and he's easily he sees the light being lit up. It's displaying the quantity that he needs to pick, and he's putting in his order. By integrating with the WMS, we're getting that order demand, and then we're using the WES to integrate with the lights, display that quantity to the user, and light it up when it's needed. And then this individual is using it for a put process. So again, once the items are picked, you can then use lights to determine which put wall cubby should I put my item into. And that's an easy way for the operator to complete their task. So by leveraging Pick to Light, you can see that the operator was able to confirm each inventory movement, which also allows for better tracking of the inventory and enables better accuracy. So the lights provide an at-a-glance way for the operator to quickly and efficiently complete the task at hand. And if you leverage conveyor along with Pick to Light, to route totes or containers throughout the building, the WES is able to ensure it's routing the work in order to balance the workloads instead of routing containers on a fixed route that may cause issues downstream. So the next area, we kind of touched on this before, many of you are facing labor challenges. We can see that over 70% of you are reporting you can't find enough labor or your labor is unreliable. So instead of using Pick to Light or having a more manual process, you might be looking at ways based on the polling question to automate that further. So you're looking at ASRS systems, goods to persons systems. So for companies that are interested in those types of improvements, an ASRS not only can help enhance the throughput and performance, it can also reduce dependence on labor, maximize your space utilization, and help companies adhere to social distancing rules, as you don't need as many people walking around. So when you combine an ASRS with a goods-to-person station, you're able to further automate the order fulfillment process and complete more orders with less headcount. So inventory is brought to the users logged into the GTP station where the orders are assigned by the warehouse execution system, and the operator is presented exactly with inventory that needs to be picked, the quantity to remove from the inventory tote, and which order to place items into. So instead of walking to 3 different locations to pick 3 different items for an order as an example, the operator is able to remain at this station and the inventory is brought to them. And so you can see on the right, this is just an example layout of what this could look like. So typically you have the ASRS system, behind or, in front of the goods to person stations, a set of conveyor that the WES is routing the inventory and the order containers to that station. And then you see the station here where the operator would be working and it's presented the work at hand. And so WES is making all this possible by orchestrating all the movements of the cases and totes into and out of the ASRS. It's routing the product downstream to the GTP stations. And if you think about the complexity to run this type of system, there's an infinite set of possibilities and decisions that have to be made. And the WES is fully orchestrating this subsystem by telling the ASRS what to produce, retrieve, the quantity that's needed, and where to send the items to complete the orders. And the WES is doing this all while making sure that each GTP station is balanced and that we always have an inventory tote next up and ready to present to that picker. So now we're going to get into another use case, and we're going to watch one more video about how AMRs can be leveraged to aid order fulfillment. And so in this video, we're showing an AMR that's actually going to go pick up a cart, and it's going to bring that cart to the user that happens to be at a pick station where it has inventory available, and they're going to be presented to what to pick and where to place it onto the cart. So instead of having a manual cart that someone is, rolling around and walking through, all over the DC to get the inventory it needed, the AMR is actually bringing that cart to them, and then they're able to fulfill that order and get it ready on the cart. So with that use case that we saw, the WES is able to activate the AMR when needed based on the orders that are ready to be fulfilled. It's also directing the AMR exactly where to go and which destination to go to. If one line is picked, what's the next stop for that AMR to visit? And most AMR vendors require inputs to inform the AMR exactly what steps to do next. And they're missing a full integrated solution where we feel the WMS is not best suited to do that type of integration. And that WES layer is really providing the orchestration to keep the WMS more focused on the financial integrity of the inventory and receiving the inventory, but the WES is able to orchestrate that AMR fleet and make sure it's getting orders processed. So along with the AMR that we were looking at, there's also AMRs that can help with long haul movements that are typically done via forklift. So if you need to move pallets, from receiving to a storage area, it's traditionally done by a forklift operator, but there actually are AMRs that can fulfill that same task. And by leveraging the AMRs, it can also help reduce the safety incidents that we often see with forklift operators. And so we're actually wrapping up now, and I hope you were able to just see some of the examples of how WES was able to leverage in your DC. And we're going to move on to Q&A because we want to make sure we have time to answer some of your questions. So thanks all for joining, and then we'll get to some of the questions that you guys have posted in the chat.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. And as Suzanne mentioned, we are going to move on to the question and answer portion of our event. And as a reminder to our attendees, you may ask a question online in the Q&A feature on your screen. So Suzanne, I do have some questions that have come in. I will go ahead and get started with those. My first question is, what is the biggest impact WES can have in a DC?
Okay, good question. Yes, I think really it's unlike the WMS, the WES is able to make decisions in real time, and so the WES is constantly taking in the different data points within your building to really maximize your operation and what should be occurring next. So it's making sure that it's balancing workloads, it's meeting your SLAs, and it's ensuring equipment uptime, which allows you to get the most out of your operation.
All right, my next question is, how does WES help manage labor?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, as long as, we covered a lot of different use cases where, you're able to minimize labor due to the automation, but if you do have a lot of labor in your building, we have integration with labor management tools like our goalpost tool to help manage how the work is released to the various stations or users. Keeping your labor occupied, but making sure we're not overloading any given user. And we're also always taking in that labor productivity, so we're able to track, how fast are your pickers picking, and the WES is consuming all that information to better plan.
Okay, let's see here. What kind of products can you handle with pick-to-light?
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, we review, when we have a customer, that's interested in using this technology, we always review your product mix and the SKUs that you have in your building to see if it's a good fit. And then our pick-to-light can be set up to flex based on your product mix, so we can slot, larger products with a larger section of the lights, and then smaller products, with smaller, like the video we saw there, it was very tight, a small product, so all the lights were close together. And then if you do have a bigger product mix, our lights can be set up to cover that.
All right, moving on here. How many goods-to-person stations can a WES handle?
Yeah, I mean, so the WES, the goods-to-person station is just, an easy configuration that we're able to add as far as, tracking, do I have 5 or 10 stations? But I think the key here would be, what volumes do you need to handle? What's the output you're looking to get at these goods-to-person stations? And that's where our teams really do a volume performance testing, because we do want to make sure that our software and the hardware is scaled to the volumes that you need to meet. And so, with each customer that we implement, we're running those volumes performance testing to make sure we have the right infrastructure in place that will meet those requirements.
And can I use my goods-to-person station for inventory control?
Yes, yeah, good question. We didn't really get into that today. So not only can you use those goods-to-person stations for a picking environment, you do need a station where you're able to replenish the inventory within the ASRS. So we have typically what we call like a decant station, where you're taking a vendor case, you're breaking it open, and you're dumping it into the tote so that it can be stored into the ASRS system. And the WES is tracking all that, making sure we know, which SKU and quantity is in which tote. And then at these stations, you can also use them for auditing or cycle count. So within the WES, you can see what's in your ASRS system. You can select the quantity you want to count or the SKU. And then we also use it for auditing. If there's a short pick at one of the stations and you might not want to ship it out short, we can send it to the audit station and someone can take a look at it.
Okay, this next question is one I know that we get a lot, and it is, can a WES integrate with the hardware I already have?
Awesome, yes. So I would say the short answer is yes. We have an integration layer called Momentum Connect, and I think that's a very important layer to make sure that we have an easy way to connect to anything that's external from our system, whether that be another vendor or automation that you already have, or the WMS. And so we have several base APIs that we do that with, but we also can leverage, any integration protocol that another vendor might have to make sure we can do that connection.
Okay, let's see, do we have some more questions here? Next one is, can your WES only work with certain AMR vendors?
Okay, yep. So right now we're partnered with Fetch, and that was what you saw in the video we went over today, and this kind of goes to the question actually before, but our workflows on the WES platform should really be hardware agnostic. So all the software, logical business logic, it sits up higher than the low-level integration. And the ways we're able to do that is our microservices-based architecture. So that allows us to easily integrate with other vendors because we can keep the same workflow and just need to change that quick protocol to actually talk to the individual hardware.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, next question is, will it cause problems if I need to add automation later to my existing WES?
I think, what's really important when you're, evaluating a WES platform is the ability for that platform to scale as your business grows. So, our platform is modularized. So if you want to start out with something smaller, maybe basic automation, you just have routing or Pixelite. As long as you're getting on the platform that is stable and can grow and has extra modules or packages that you can add later, there really should be no problem at all. So by leveraging, a WES platform like we have here at Honeywell, you could easily then add an ASRS module in the future that, helps get you to your long-term goals.
All right. I do have a couple more questions that have come in. Let's see, the next question is there actually a difference between a WES and a WCS, or are they generally interchangeable terms?
Yes, the WCS is kind of how the WS started. So definitely the WCS, was kind of the original layer, the warehouse control system, right? And it was more about just taking specific direction, right? So I'm going to take this carton, I'm going to route it to point A, B, C. It wasn't really doing the dynamic decision making that the WES systems can do today. And the WS also is exposed to a lot more information than a traditional WCS layer was previously. So again, that WES is kind of bleeding into the business processes that a WMS might have traditionally done in the past, and it's able to use that information to make smarter decisions.
Okay, and I think we have time for one last question. So that is, how can we support ROI comparing goods to person picking and AMRs?
Yeah, I think we leverage our OSD team a lot for that up front. So we would definitely want to partner with you on understanding, again, like what are your business goals? What is your growth rate, year over year, to really figure out what is the best solution for your operation. So something like a goods to person station that we went over today with an ASRS system, that's going to give you high throughput. But if you don't, really need that much throughput, you don't want to invest in that much capital on all that equipment or automation, AMRs might be a better play. That's still giving you the throughput that you need, but, eliminating that labor cost.
All right. Well, thanks, Suzanne. I think that's all the time that we have for questions today. Thanks to all of our attendees for their participation. So as a reminder, within the next few days, you can access this presentation on demand at sps.honeywell.com by clicking on the resources link under the automation support section. You will also receive an email with a link to this presentation as well as to our white paper, Leveraging Data Science for Decision Intelligence in the DC. And also for our attendees, there's a feature that's called Related Content. You'll be able to find that in the Related Content area during this live event, and that includes more information about warehouse execution system software, as well as our most recent issue of the On the Move publication. So on behalf of Honeywell Intelligrated, thank you for attending today's On the Move webinar. We hope you can join us for our next webinar in our March series, Bring Fast Issue Resolution into View with Remote Video Enablement. That will be on Tuesday, March 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Registration information is available on our website at sps.honeywell.com by clicking on the resources link under the automation support section. Thanks again, Suzanne, for a very informative presentation. Thanks to everyone for joining, and have a great afternoon.